The following is a local resident producers program. The program content is the sole responsibility of the producer and does not necessarily reflect the views or policies of CATV2, Oshkosh Community Access Television, the City of Oshkosh, the Oshkosh Cable Television Advisory Commission, or Time Warner Cable.
Hi everyone, welcome to another edition of Eye on Oshkosh. I'm Cheryl Hentz, your host, and I'm very pleased on this edition to welcome Tony Palmeri. Most of you, I'm sure, know him. He is a communications professor at the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh. He has hosted for probably 8 to 10 years his own public access show called Commentary. He's run for state assembly a couple of times, most recently in this last November election, and we are very pleased to welcome Tony to the show. He's going to be filling in for Melanie during her leave of absence, and we're just real thrilled to have you.
Thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for asking me.
You'll be an asset to the show.
Thanks.
We're also very pleased on this edition to welcome one of our Oshkosh area school board members, Don Sween. He's one of the newest members. He's been on the board since April, so he's got about 6-7 months under his belt, but he's been an asset, I think, so far. And Don, thanks very much for being here.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
It's a pleasure to have you. Want to talk about, I think a number of issues going on in the Oshkosh School District, but the first thing right off the bat would be the budget. It's budget time for everybody, municipalities and school districts alike. You have, at the school board level, approved the budget already, correct?
Yes. Yes,
How big of a budget is it?
Our budget is a little bit over $100 million this year, and I was not totally involved with the whole activity. I mean, it had started some of the budget work before I became on board, or before I got on board, but it's about $100 million, just give or take a little bit.
Okay.
So.
Now, when was that actually approved?
I think that was, I gotta stop and think, it might have been the last meeting or the meeting before.
Okay, so
November.
just
So
like
it's just recently, yes.
October probably, sometime
Yes,
in October.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so it's about $100 million.
Mm-hmm.
Were there any kinds of cuts made that were significant in any way? How much fine tuning did you have to do?
Not too much, as I recall from the process. When I first got on the board, everything started spinning real quickly, and
It seemed to anyway, right?
Things were coming at me right and left, and it's like, wow, what's this, what's that? And but I think it was pretty much they had kind of tweaked it a little bit and had a lot of the bugs we did before that point, and consequently, why it passed. I believe the vote was 5-2 or something like that.
Isn't it true that the board had a budget or had a surplus in the 2003-2004 budget?
Yes, we did.
And then they moved that surplus into the next budget, right?
As a matter of fact, no, we didn't.
Part of it?
No. What happened was we had a $1.1 million surplus this year,
Right.
which resulted in not hiring teachers. Some teachers, our technology director had left, so we didn't fill that position till late. And so there was a bunch of things that happened where we ended up with an excess.
Mm-hmm.
What happened is we took $600,000 of that and put it towards a debt retirement type thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then the $500,000 we rolled into the unfunded balance. We had originally talked about returning that back to the taxpayers.
Yeah.
And after sitting and studying it a little bit more and figuring out what was going on personally, it seemed like in our best interest to move it into the fund balance so that down the road a ways we wouldn't be as penalized with funding and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
As you know, the state revenues and things like that are based on a formula which is huge. I mean, it seems like it goes on forever. It's
Sure.
this and that. And when you do one thing this year, it affects down the road farther. And it seemed like the long-lasting effects would outweighed the opportunity for us to, it felt like the benefits of us keeping it and putting it in the unfunded balance outweighed the option of giving it back, or the purpose of giving it back, which would have amounted to about $15 per $100,000. And when you put it into a, something a little bit more tangible, it's about a quarter a week.
Is that 2 Butterburger baskets? $15? Is that?
Let's call Shirley Maddox and ask
I've
her.
never bought a Butterburger basket. I'm sitting in Melanie Bleckel's seat, and already it's like the Melanie factor coming in. Don, out of that $100 million in the budget, about $70 million comes from the state. Is that right?
About 2/3.
About 2/3.
Yeah.
What are your general feelings about the way the state funds the public schools? Is it a complete disaster? What do you think about it?
Well, I don't think it's a complete disaster. At this point, I think it seems to be working, although it seems to put an extra burden on the local taxpayers to have to step to the plate and fess up a little bit more money for the schools. But at this point, it seems to be working. I think we're one of the lower spending districts in the state, and consequently, we.
Well,
seem to be coming out okay.
it is a major drain on the state budget, correct?
Yes,
right.
yes, it is. Yeah.
So it's not working for the state budget. Apparently, they never really figured out how they were going to fund all this.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's exactly right. And I'm, to be quite honest, I'm not sure exactly how it should be funded. I haven't, with everything else that's been happening,
Sure.
I haven't had the opportunity to really sit down and take a real close look at it and say, okay, this is what we probably should be doing, or this would work better for this. But at this point, the 2/3 funding seems to help, and each year they increase the amount of revenue per student a little bit. Although there's some talk now of doing some things to reduce some of that, which could put us in a little bit of a bind again.
How did you, because of course one of those revenue things that calculates how much money you're getting from the state is based on how many students you have in the
Yes.
district. How did the district do this year with what did they calculate it on, the third Friday in September, I
Yes,
think, is when they
yes.
take the final enrollment numbers. Did you lose students? Did you stay
Yes.
about the same?
We
or-
lost, I believe, and I think it was around 170 students, maybe something like that, or somewhere in the 100 students that we lost totally. And our cost per student is about $7,700 per student, or about $7,800, and consequently, you lose 100 students, that tallies up real quick.
Right.
Is that about what they were projecting to lose, or was something going on that's,
Well,
that
it's-
sounds like a lot, and yet maybe it's not.
Well, we have over 10,000 students, 10,400 or something like that. So you lose 100 or 150. It seems like a lot, but yet at the same time, it's not a huge amount. The problem with losing 150 students is that we don't lose them all from one locale. There might be 10 from the high school, and each high school, and maybe 5 from each middle school, and so consequently, when we start dealing with budgets and things, we really don't have the opportunity to save staffing money, or a lot of staffing money, because of the loss of those students, because they're so spread out over the whole district.
So here in Oshkosh, they were pretty much spread out then? Because I
Yeah.
know in Neenah, they're having a problem with, trying to figure out where they're going to put students and how they're going to get them to what schools, because they've got a growth spurt in, 1 or 2 areas. So,
Yeah.
okay, well, that's good for Oshkosh.
But and right now we're looking at our projection plans for the upcoming years. We've got Ted Samers working on projection plans, and we've got another firm that's doing some demographics and looking at where the housing trends are and things like that, so that we can get a better grip, and we know exactly where we're headed. But we are losing students at I don't know if it's a fast rate, but we're losing students.
I guess I want to touch on that a little bit. There's a couple firms that you just said that are working as consultants, individuals or firms working as consultants for the district. Why does Oshkosh have historically kind of been prone to move in that direction of using consultants? I cover Neenah and Menasha politics and school districts. I've not heard of that up there. They do their own stuff. Why is Oshkosh so prone to using consultants?
I personally, I really don't know, although I guess we want to make sure that we're getting the best bang for the buck, and sometimes important rather than just jump right into the frying pan and say this is what's going to happen. Get some professionals in to look at the situation and say, okay, this is what's projected, this is how it's going to work out, and then go from there.
Right.
The demographics, it's rather interesting. We've had some meetings, and that report should be coming to the board within the next month or so, and as projection enrollments and things like that. And all that stuff is going to be very beneficial to, future budgets and school reorganizations if boundary changes are needed.
But Don,
down the road or something.
about 3 or 4 years ago, and correct me if I'm wrong, there were all kinds of enrollment projections done that I remember hearing about, and it seemed to lead to an emergency dealing with boundaries. Remember we were hearing all this talk about
Yep.
the enrollments are going to be such that Oshkosh North isn't going to have any students, Oshkosh West is going to have too many, so we're going to have to re-boundary. What happened to that discussion? What happened to the boundary discussion? Has it disappeared?
I don't think it's completely disappeared. I think, we're constantly, as a board from the time I've been on it, we're constantly looking at those situations, and that's why we're doing one of these demographic
But did the
things.
projections turn out to be wrong?
I don't think they're completely wrong. North High School is losing students,
Okay.
And I do believe that they're going to be in the football next year, probably Division II or Class B school or whatever they are now, rather than Division I. And so the enrollments are dropping, and there is some concern. And obviously, one of the concerns with the 2 high schools is that we can keep our programs pretty much
Right.
equal across both sides of the town without having to move students from one school to another to pick up a course and things like that.
But it does seem every time the board does talk about possible boundary changes, that really fires up neighborhoods, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, yeah.
So is it possible that maybe the board has kind of gotten, for lack of a better word, intimidated by this? That they know if they bring up the topic of boundaries, you're going to get people coming to school board meetings who normally don't come?
Which is good. I'd like to see a lot of people come to school board meetings and express their concerns. But you're right. It does. Whenever you talk about moving a boundary or changing a school,
Sure.
neighborhood school or something like that, those people are really concerned and justifiably. But it hasn't gone away. The city, in the city itself, the neighborhoods are changing, and some of the schools that in the past that might be lower numbers, as the older folks sell them and younger people move into these houses as first-time home buyers and stuff like that, there's a possibility that some of these schools will go up.
Do we have schools right now that are crowded, that are above their capacity?
I don't believe any of the schools are totally above capacity.
Okay.
In the past, we've always said that our schools we had a capacity type thing,
Sure.
which was about 85% of actual capacity. And now we're going to be changing that so that when we get our new demographics, our new books and things, projection books, the schools will be set up for 100% capacity, and then we'll know exactly. Now, when we talk about 100% capacity, they look at, special education programs and classrooms which have fewer numbers, the SAGE schools which have fewer numbers in their classrooms. So they'll be looking at those things.
Okay.
I don't want to beat a dead horse, and I'm not beating up on you, I swear to God.
Okay.
But I want to go back to this because it just, Don, it sticks in my craw. Other school districts can figure out their population and where kids need to be. They can figure these things out within their administration. I mean, your administrators, like any school district, are being paid astronomical dollars. I'm not saying that they don't work hard for the money, because they do. And I know that better than anybody. But it just seems like if other school districts' administration can figure out these things, why can't Oshkosh's?
I'll be quite honest, I don't know. And to be honest with you, I think I would want to look at some of these other school districts to find out, because there's a chance that they have, I know the person who's working with our demographics has worked with other school districts, Kimberly, I think, and Kaukauna, and some of the other schools in the valley here. And so consequently, it may not be brought in the forefront because Oshkosh is more conservative, let's say, and they really want to know what's going on. And it's a fair amount of money that ends up being spent on those things, but in the long run, I at this point, I think it's beneficial that we do some of these. And so,
Does the board vote on consultant? The board doesn't vote on whether or not to have a consultant, do they? Or is that just an administrative prerogative?
we've talked about it.
Okay.
We've talked about it, and way back when there may have been a vote to bring somebody on. I know our facilities and finance committee, we have these people in, and we've talked about them and said, you know, let's do this, let's get some information and get some really good information. And I think what we're going to have is some really good information. And you know, it's always good to have experts in particular fields do some of these things rather than an administrator who's, you know, wears many different hats and things like that. So
See, and I appreciate what you're saying, but I think the experts are the people
That
who
we hire.
deal with this day in and day out. Consultants do a plethora of different things and work
Yeah.
with a lot of different clients, not just education-based.
yeah, well,
And I
well,
think
you
the
know,
school districts people are the ones who are the experts.
well, this is true, but yet at the same time, when we are looking at some of these demographic type things, it's real difficult for myself or an administrator to project what's going to happen in the town of Algoma, the town of Black Wolf, and these places. You know, where's the building going to take place? What's going to happen? You know, are we going to have a plethora of homes out there in the Grundy Farms where, you know, we need to build a school out there, and you know what's projected for out in those areas and in different areas, and so consequently, those are the people that, you know, they go in, they talk to the developers, they talk to the people that live there, and they get these projections, and they say, okay, we've got 1,000 lots out here, and this is the type of home we're going to put out here, and this is, you know, the type of family that you can expect to live in these places. So from that sense, I think we do need those types of experts, and we certainly don't have those on staff.
Okay. Go ahead.
Don, you ran for school board in 2000. It was 2004, wasn't it? Or
Yes.
yeah. Now, when you did run, just refresh us. What was the major issue that you ran on?
Well, one of my big concerns was that the community schools or the neighborhood schools,
Okay.
I felt those were real important. I also felt that communications was real important with the school board, so that, you know, they have people that they can talk to and feel good about talking to, and making sure that, you know, just kind of keeping an eye on things, I guess. And I also, you know, if you're not aware, I used to be a school teacher
Right.
for 32 years in the Oshkosh-School district, and I kind of came under the premise that I'd bring a little bit different
Sure.
perspective to the school board, which I think in some cases I have.
Right now, and we'll talk about that. On the neighborhood schools, when you were a candidate or before you were a candidate, what did you perceive as the problem?
Well, I think what they, you know, and as I'm getting more in tune to what the bigger picture, and I thought I was aware of the big picture before, but as I become more involved with the big picture, at that time the neighborhood schools were one of those things that they had talked about of phasing out and going to a larger elementary schools and things like that. And I just felt that the neighborhood schools were vital. They're an important link to a community. They kind of bond the people that live in that neighborhood together.
Don, define neighborhood school for us. Is a neighborhood school a school that a child can walk to?
I would say so, yeah.
Okay.
You know, that it's not a large school. Although as the budgets become tight and stuff like that, there's more inclination to look at larger elementary schools where you can, you know, instead of having split classes, 3-4 classes, you know, maybe 2 or 3 of those, you could get away from some of that in larger schools. But yet at the same time, the neighborhood school would be the one that the students can walk to. Their parents feel comfortable about letting their kids get on their bicycle, ride to the school, and
So if we did have an enrollment disparity between, say, the high schools, Oshkosh West and Oshkosh North, would you be opposed to busing kids that live in the west area over to north? Because that was one of the solutions trotted out, wasn't that?
Yeah, I'm not in favor of doing a lot of busing. Busing is very expensive, and
But
What's the alternative, then?
Yeah,
though? Because this could happen, correct? Our demographic consultant experts may,
could.
right? So then what do we do at that point?
well, at that point, I guess we'd really have to take a real good hard look at it and say, okay, what do we want to do? Maybe we restructure the entire school system, look at the bigger picture, and say, okay, we're going to go with one high school and we'll do something like that. And I'm not suggesting that. Don't get me wrong.
Sure.
But I think what has to happen is when it gets to that point, we really have to sit down and take a good hard look at it and not do anything hastily. Really take our time and look at what needs to be done so that we're meeting the needs of the students. I mean, they're our number one client. I mean, they're the people that we're there for. And if it did mean that we had to bus some students across town, maybe we could, particularly if West became overcrowded and North became undercrowded or under.
So then you obviously then don't support busing for other purposes, like to say balance the mix of, say, middle class and children in poverty, or cultural balance.
I guess that's right. And I think there's some schools in our district that are not as economic,
Right.
and there's a few concerns there. But for the most part, I think that Oshkosh has a pretty good balance. I mean, if we look at the schools and the minorities and the special ed students and things like that, if we look at them, I think they're fairly close. I don't think there's any one school that has, anything way above and beyond.
Okay, sure.
How are the charter schools working out? Now, we've got 2 or 3 right now.
Well, actually, we have 5.
Oh. Well, if I add the 2 and the 3, I've got 5.
You do. 2 of them are out at Oakwood. They're the EAA charter school, and
Okay.
the other one that's out there is
the Earth Charter?
Earth Charter, I
Okay.
believe it is, yeah. The 3 that you're referring to would be the Alps, Journeys, and the alternative or East High School.
Okay.
And they seem to be working fairly well. As anything that's brand new, there's some glitches that need to be looked at, and I suspect that in the future they're going to be coming to the board and looking to possibly add an administrator to the Journeys and the East High School, and some things like that. But yeah, there's been a few glitches, and as they hopefully will get worked out and we've only been in this for 9 weeks now.
Yeah, Don, I'm sure some of our viewers, maybe many, don't know really what a charter school is. What is a charter school?
A charter school is really an alternative type of a school. Our charter schools are kind of set up. The Alps is for the younger elementary kids, and it's kind of, I don't really want to say a gift and talent because anybody can get in, but it's kind of you move along at a little bit faster pace than you would in an elementary. The Journey School, which is 7th through high school, is primarily a project-based project-based school where the students select projects, and then they incorporate the benchmarks and standards that they have to meet, and so that they meet all these standards and they get their credits that way. And then, of course, the other is the alternative high school. It's for the kids the students that, for one reason or another, aren't comfortable with the traditional high school setting. They may be students that are at risk, or they may not be students at risk, that are just students that want an alternative and doing something a little bit different. And
What's the capacity that these? You're chuckling, Don. That doesn't make me feel good.
No, that's okay. That's okay.
I mean, if you don't know, that's fine. But
no,
I'm curious what the capacity for these schools is cumulatively.
I just don't want to get them mixed up here. I think there's 7. Cumulatively, it's about 150. I'm going to say. I've got all that information in my packets, and my computer in my mind here is not functioning real well.
Sure, that's fine. How close to capacity are we? I mean,
very close.
Okay.
The charter high school is very, very close. The Journey School is at capacity. Fact is, we had a waiting list for the Journeys school, and the Alps is a little bit under capacity at this point.
The reason I ask is because I want to say probably about 2 months ago from when this show will actually air, I had actually called you at home on a Saturday to talk about the school board meeting that was playing right at that particular time, and it was being replayed. And I had some concerns about the district discussing, not so much discussing, but considering seriously hiring a consultant to market the charter schools. And it sounds, I mean, if you've got a capacity of 150 and you're pretty close to that, I'm not sure why at this point in time the district would need to hire an outside consultant to do that. Where do we stand on that consultant?
Well, you were going to get there, weren't you?
You knew I would. I'm relentless.
Yes. Well, I believe that consultant is working with the board and one of the other committees in regards to the PR. And we're looking, I shouldn't say we're looking, there's been some talk in regards to a PR person in the Oshkosh Area School District. As you know, we had one a few years ago, and as an instructor at that point, I was wondering why we had a PR person. Now as a board member, I kind of understand why we probably should have a PR person, and so this person's working along with us to try to set up some guidelines. And
Is that Heidi Strand?
I do believe it is, yes.
What is she getting paid?
I personally don't know.
See, now I thought that charter schools were not established unless the demand already was there. I mean,
Well,
the idea that we have to market and promote the charter school, and I could be completely off base on this.
Well, the idea of course, you know, and I don't want to sound like a business person, but my perception of it is, if we get students, you know, if we can do a good job of selling our charter schools, and our charter schools are excellent opportunities for students, you know, there's a bunch of untapped people out there that aren't, you know, homeschooled children, children from other school districts that would like to come here. And so the idea of that was to get our word out and get the word out and say, hey, this is what Oshkosh is doing, and this is the type of thing that you can be involved with in Oshkosh, where other communities probably couldn't afford to do that. You know,
Do children already in the district have first priority in the charter school? The district could not take someone from outside the district above a child in the district, could they?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
Yet at the same time, that one I would have
All
to
right.
look up and check
Okay.
out.
You had mentioned that now that you're on the board, you see the reason for having a PR person. What would that be?
Well, there's so many misconceptions, I think, that go along with the school system. You know, there's just a lot of misconceptions, not really misconceptions, but different thoughts. I mean, if take school boundaries for an example. If we had a PR person, that person could probably, you know, get the message out, and hopefully if we have to do some boundary changes, that we will get out and talk to the people before we propose any boundary changes, which are not coming at this point.
Keep reminding people.
Let's underscore that.
Yes. But, you know, and the taxes, you know, the taxes at this time of year, I've been getting emails saying, you know, how can you not do this or how can you do that? And I think what we have to do is get the message out there that the most important resource that we have in Oshkosh are our students. And if we don't do a good job of educating them and doing the best possible job we can, they're going to move out, or if the district finds out, the PR person could also sell our district, sell the community of Oshkosh. And so that, because from my understanding from some of these people that we've talked to, is that there's a new breed of individual parents out there that move to districts, school districts that are really good, and then worry about finding a job. They don't move because of the job, they move because their kids will get a better education. And so if we can, you know, get that message out there that we've got the best education and we've got all these things to offer, you know, and again, you know, maybe it's outside the scope of Oshkosh, maybe it goes, you know, much deeper than that. We also should have a good website, you know, get a website that's up and that does a good PR job, you know, that sells the Oshkosh Area School District, because we do have a fine school district. There's just no doubt about it.
I couldn't agree with you more, but I think, I mean, could principals not in their newsletters that they send out to families, couldn't they get the message out about the PR things that they want to convey? I mean, one of the things that I heard at that meeting that I had actually called you about was Nina has a top-rate school district, and you know what? They promote the heck out of it themselves. They don't have PR people. They don't have outside consultants. Don, I'm sorry. This is ridiculous. It's a ridiculous waste of our money.
Yeah, and you're probably absolutely almost right. How's that?
Well, I don't know that I like just being almost right. Come on.
Absolutely almost right.
Absolutely, almost right.
Absolutely. Oh, well then,
So, you know,
by all means, I feel much better.
That's good. I'm glad you do, because my hands are sweating.
Come on, it's all right,
No,
Don.
it's and you know, you're probably right, and you're entitled to your opinion. And you know, as we go along, I'm sure that we're going to find out that, you know, maybe we won't be doing as much of that. You know, there's at this point, I look at it and say, it's probably good, okay, that we're doing some of these things so that we can get up to the proper speed. As for Neenah, you know, I've heard that Neenah's a good school district. I heard that when I was teaching. People said, you should move up to Neenah and teach. It's better up there. But, you know, you don't know. I don't know that for a fact. And now Appleton is the one that everybody is building up and saying they've got a good program, and they're doing this and that and the other thing. And they very well may be doing that. But I think we have to do what's best for Oshkosh at this point. Mm-hmm. And for right now, I think getting some of these consultants and getting some of these people in and helping, you know, get some direction. And once we get that direction, then we can cast them off to the side. And because I personally don't like pouring money down a hole either.
Sure.
Well, and especially when we did away with the PR job, you know, just a couple of years ago. And see, I don't think it's necessarily a good use of money. I think it's feathering somebody's nest. And one of the reasons that I like you is because you're willing to do a little investigative homework. You know, when and we're going to talk about this a little bit later. But you know, when the issue of the soft drinks being sold in the schools came up, you know, Don Sween was the only one on the school board who went out and did some homework. You contacted the Appleton School District, and you came back to the board with some interesting results. Not that it did a heck of a lot of good in the long run, but, you know, I gave you kudos for that. Yeah. And it just seems to me that the school board members should maybe be looking at some of these other districts first before they start, you know, earmarking our tax dollars for some of this stuff.
And we are. You know, we're with all these programs, we're talking about restructuring our high schools and middle schools. We've got a 6-12 restructuring group, and they're doing some very, very outstanding work, going to different districts, looking at programs and things that will improve the student outcomes. You know, so that their grades and testing and all those things are up higher. Especially with this No Child Left Behind, we're kind of, you know, and our kids do very well in tests, but there's always room for a little bit more.
Why don't we talk about No Child Left Behind for a couple of minutes? What's your general view on that legislation?
Well, my personal feeling is that it's going to be fairly costly to institute a lot of the things, the mandates that they want. Yet at the same time, it has really forced our school district to really take a good look at what we're doing and what's being taught, how we're getting the message across to the students, and things like that. And they're refocusing on, you know, the benchmarks, the standards, and making sure that everything meshes together. So I think it's, from that standpoint, it's been real good.
What subjects did you teach?
I taught industrial technology, woodworking.
Okay. Would No Child Left Behind have changed your teaching somehow? Would it force you to do more testing?
It may have, yeah. One of the things I always like to tell people is that we did authentic assessment all the time, because it was more of a hands-on manipulative activity, and you would teach and then the students would go and do something, and, you know, it was authentic assessment. They either knew how to do it or they didn't. It was not a paper and pencil type thing. But yeah, it really brings everything together. You know, it forces the tech ed department to look at what are you doing in the math world. I mean, what types of math things are we doing so that we can interconnect with the mathematics department? What types
be more cohesive.
Right, and what types of things with science and more writing activities. You know, whether it's manuals or description of how to put something together, or something like this. And we're just taking a look at the total picture, and it's causing everybody to work together so that many of our standards in the tech ed crossed over into math and vice versa.
Now the feds probably are not going to come through with the money.
Probably not.
So it becomes kind of like an unfunded mandate, doesn't it?
Kind of, yes.
Yeah. Is that going to mean local property taxes in the long run?
I couldn't tell you that for sure.
Sure.
I would hope it wouldn't. It will involve a little bit more spending on testing and things like that, but the state may come through and pick some of that up. But at any rate, we're moving along, and I think we're ahead of the game, so to speak. And we're, our staff is doing a great job out there, and we've got these collaborative times that they're using to put these things together and looking and working, and so I think we're in good shape, and hopefully it's not going to create an undue burden on the tax dollars that we have.
Have we hired any consultants to figure out how to put an NCLB in place? Some districts have done that. There are NCLB consultants, right? Do we have them?
No, we don't.
Okay.
Well, I'm relieved.
Wanted to ask her before Cheryl did.
Thank God.
All right.
You got out of that one, Don.
Thank you.
Now, we just talked a little bit about taxes and tax levies. We're taping this on the 18th of November, and the night before this show was taped, you guys, kind of took a peek at the 05-06 budget, correct? What, I didn't happen to see that meeting, but what transpired there?
Well, I was there.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yes. Basically, what it was to look at assumptions of, the budgeting, the revenue, the expenditures, and things like that. And we tried to give some direction to our administration as to which way we would be looking at for budgeting next year. And there were a couple of suggestions made, and one was to keep the tax levy pretty much the same as it was this year. And forgive me, and then the other one was to keep the rate, the dollar rate, the same as it was. And then the third one that was kind of looked at was to set the tax levy as high or at whatever the state would allow. And unfortunately, I was on the side for the setting the levy to the max.
Why? Why would you do that?
Well, there's a lot of things that happen with taxes and things like that, and and as I become more and more aware of it, it becomes more compelling. I'm not an advocate of spending the taxpayers' dollars and raising lots of money, but if we, for an example, if we had done that $500,000 that we talked about a bit ago, if we had returned that to the taxpayers, down the road that would have probably cost us to raise the taxes even more, because they're saying, okay, you don't need this much money, so consequently we're going to cut back on your state revenues, which in turn will cause us to have to raise a higher tax levy, as I understand it. And right now we're in the process of restructuring 612, and I suspect with the restructuring and changing and doing some things, it's going to cost us some money.
Now, I don't want to interrupt, but when you say restructuring 612, what does that mean?
Well, it means looking at the school, the way the school is run. Right now, as Mr. Pobo would say, we're running a factory model of a school where you have first hour, second hour, third hour, 6 hours a day, and they go class to class, or 7 hours a day, and they go class to class. They're looking more at different ways of presenting materials. It could be a block schedule type thing for some. It could be houses where you have smaller learning communities, some of those types of things. Block scheduling, I might have mentioned that. Or academies. And so it's just a different way of presenting material and getting students to become better learners.
Okay.
And so consequently, there's going to be some cost probably involved with that. And last night, Dr. Herzog had mentioned that with the new standards, the benchmarks and standards, that she's approximately $500,000 short on textbooks money that she's going to need to institute the benchmarks or the standards and stuff like that to keep us going in the same direction. So consequently, I guess from my perspective, I would rather see us be prepared for that, for those expenses, and if we don't need them, then we can, pull some back. It's not saying, you know, it primarily when we do the assumptions, it's just to look at it and say, okay, what kinds of things are we thinking about? Okay, I mean, where are we at budget-wise and stuff like that? And one of the things I don't want to see us do again is get into a situation where we have to make lots and lots of cuts.
Right.
And one of the scenarios, and our Brad Kaufman just kind of, you know, he knows the numbers, he knows these things, and he just kind of said if we do the one, we could possibly looking at a $3 million shortfall. In other words, we'd have to trim the budget $3 million or something. And I think in Oshkosh here, we've cut programs and cut some things that I think are vital and that should be back in some of the schools. You know, one of them being intramurals for the middle schools.
Right.
That program was cut a few years ago, and it's still not back in. And you know, it's got a fairly pricey, very high price tag, but you know, it's $60,000-$70,000 or something like that to have the 5 schools. But you know, those are the types of things where, you know, I think students need those types.
Yeah, and we don't know what's happening with the state, right? I mean, they say they're funding 2/3, but they're really not. It's actually less than 2/3.
In some cases, yeah, we're probably realistically, you know, we say we're at about 2/3, but it's my understanding that we're probably in the mid to low 660.
And that could go even further down.
It could go down a little bit more, yeah.
Okay. How do you feel about 4-year-old kindergarten? Because the governor's a big supporter of 4-year-old kindergarten.
And personally, I'm not, okay? I think there's kids out there that need a Head Start, and we do have a Head Start program, or, you know, early childhood program, and those kids, they need that. But I for an 4-year-old kindergarten, I'm not in favor of it. I personally wasn't completely in favor of all-day kindergarten for all-day kindergarten, although it does bring in revenues, which probably, you know, kind of a wash there. But I just personally, I don't think 4-year-old kids are ready for an all.
Now,
I agree.
the state can't mandate that, can they?
At this point, no.
Okay, so
No, in
each
fact, kindergarten itself isn't even
okay.
required.
So it's
Yeah.
each district can do it if it wants. Have you
Yeah.
sensed any parental support for a 4-year-old kindergarten?
I haven't heard a lot.
Okay.
You know, like I said, I haven't. Nobody's contacted me and said, "Hey, we really want 4-year-old kindergarten." Nobody's contacted me and said, "Hey, stay away from 4-year-old kindergarten." It's my own personal feeling. It's like many things. You know, school is really important, and the kids like to get started. And this is my own personal perception of it. Kids like to get started at school and get going. It's kind of like playing soccer in the youth soccer league. By the time they're in 7th, 8th, 9th grade, they're sick of it. And you know, let's not burn these kids out. And, you know, and one of the things is, I do realize that the kindergarten now, it's not like it was. I didn't go to kindergarten, so I can't speak for myself. I bypassed it. I went right to 1st grade.
Oh, wow.
Good for you.
That was only because I didn't have it. But at any rate, I think they need to have some socialization, playtime, and stuff like that. But the 4-year-old kindergarten, no.
Okay.
You know, other than all-day kindergarten being a revenue-generating source for the district, have you guys done any kind of surveys of parents? How is it working out? Do you have any idea?
Personally, no. But my personal feeling is that it's working out quite well. I suspect it's working real well. I think the kids are better prepared when they get into 1st grade. Their scores and things like that should reflect that down the road a ways. And so I think it's doing what it's supposed to do.
Maybe those consultants can find out for us.
Well, we could hire one. Maybe you'd like to be one of those.
Don, I volunteered my services now.
know,
I told you, I volunteered
know.
my communications writing services to the district.
Don, can you talk a little bit about the mood on the current board? It seems to me that Tom McDermott, as president, runs good meetings. I mean, it seems like the public will come to speak, feel like they're respected. You seem to have some fairly heated discussions, but it doesn't seem to get personal and out of line. How is the relationship among the board members this year?
Oh, I think it's very good. I think it's excellent, actually. I think it's a good mix. I think we've got a nice variety of people on there from different facets. We've got some, people that are on the real conservative side, and we've got some that are on a little bit more the liberal side, and I think it's a good mix. I think it's a good balance. I think the respect for each other. I know in years past you kind of watch some of those meetings and you kind of wonder what's going on. It's like, as a teacher, I was watching those, it's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this. And I think it's better. Tom runs a very, very good meeting.
He does. I think we should give him credit for that.
Yes.
He runs a very good meeting. He keeps things moving, which is important when you're chair of a body like that. Now, you said earlier you bring the teacher's perspective to the board. What does that mean?
Well, I guess I look at it from a standpoint that when I was teaching, very, very few board members ever came to visit, and they really didn't feel, I felt that they didn't have an understanding of what it was like to be in the trenches, so to speak. And so I guess from that perspective, when we have some of these meetings and things like that, I can look at some of the things a little bit differently than they do, and hopefully I can convey my thoughts to the situation, and so that they get a little bit better understanding of what it's like to be down in the trenches. And because it's not always easy. As you work at the university,
Yes.
It can be difficult.
Well, does your status as a teacher give you any greater sympathy for the paraprofessionals? Now, you're not involved in that negotiation personally, right?
Personally, I'm not. No, it does. They do a great job. I mean, without them,
Sure.
we'd be in a real bind. I have compassion for them. I have some concerns about some of the issues that are on the table, and a couple things that bother me a little bit about it. But they do a great job, and I don't think there's any one of us on the board that does not respect them. When I was teaching, I would have special ed students in my class, and one of the paras would more often than not come along to especially the...
But if the board respects them, now correct me if you know a lot more about this than I do, but if the board respects them, why won't the board go back into negotiations with them? That really is the hang-up right now, is that correct?
It is, and it's going to binding arbitration, if I'm not mistaken.
So why did the board force them into binding arbitration?
Well, and again, I wasn't involved. This process has been going on for over 2 years, and it's from where I'm sitting and where I'm looking. I think both sides came to a stalemate where they said, hey, we're not going to go any farther this way, and we're not going to come any farther this way. And so consequently, there was no reason to go back to the bargaining table. I suspect that if the paras wanted to come back to the bargaining table with some other things, and said, hey, we're willing to come back to the table, we'd like to take a look at this aspect of it, or we'd like to talk about this or something, I think the board probably would do that. But at this point, there has been none of that. An example was the custodials, the NTEA. We were at a stalemate with them too, as I understood, because again, I got into this whole situation well after it had started. And they came back, their lawyer came back and said, hey, we're willing to look at this, and this. If you're willing to look at this, and this. And consequently, they came back, or we got back together, and we settled.
Didn't it, Cheryl, on your last eye on Oshkosh, didn't it sound like from the paraprofessional standpoint, it was simply an issue of having 8 paraprofessionals grandfathered into it?
That's how it came off to me. I mean, that was my understanding, is that it was 8 part-time, very, very part-time paraprofessionals just being grandfathered in. Certainly, I'm not part of the negotiations, and I don't, profess to know everything that's going on. I can only take what I hear. But just sitting here listening to them, it seemed like a reasonable request.
Yeah, that didn't sound very unreasonable.
Well, to be honest with you, I don't know if they've ever presented that to the board, saying, hey, we'll be happy to, because right now, I think, or I do know, the board wants to go with 8/10 of a person. In other words, full FTE is 1 FTE, and 8/10 of an FTE, and they would get full benefits. Right now, it's at 50%, and I don't know that they have come along and said, hey, we're, because I'm not sure that's the only thing that they're concerned about. They have some other concerns, and I think some of them may be well-founded, but others may not be. One of them is the fact that, and I know a bunch of these paraprofessionals relatively personally, and their concern is that we're going to go to 8/10, and then the board's going to fire all of them and hire them all back at 7,500s or something like this. And that is not, from my perspective, that is not even a thought on our case. You know, they're worried that that's going to happen, and I think that's really an unfounded worry. Granted, there may be some, you know, situations where it really warrants that, you know, we don't need a full-time aide at this particular place where, you know, maybe a half-time would do the purpose, and you might have to, you know, something like that. But it's not our intent to say, okay, all you full-time aides, you're laid
You're
off.
gone.
You know, your pairs are done. We're going to hire, and if you want to come back, we're going to hire you back. And I don't think that's it.
Well, it's just a shame it can't be worked out, you know. I mean, invariably, whenever you go to binding arbitration, one side wins, one side loses, and you've got the losing side who is bitter and really PO'd. And it would
Well-
just, you know, it would be so much better if, in a perfect world, if both sides could just come together, make some kind of compromise that everybody can live with, and everybody walks away from the negotiating table feeling somewhat good about themselves.
And yeah, I would like to do that too. And I've gone to a couple schools and talked to some of the paras, and for one reason or another, they're not even aware of what the negotiations are, what's been offered, and what is, you know, these types of things. They only get some of the hearsay type things.
So are you saying that their union representatives are not letting them know?
I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that these folks don't know what's going on, whether it's by them not going to some meetings or something like this that I've had, or what. I'm not sure.
But they're in the dark for whatever
But
reason.
for one reason or another,
Okay.
they don't know. And I suspect.
I think what frustrates a lot of people in the community is that, you know, on the one hand, we hear that the paraprofessionals are vital. You can't run the system without them. And yet it looks like their benefit package gets an incredible amount of scrutiny. We rarely hear anyone talking about the administrator
If ever.
compensation packages.
Yeah.
They're treated very generously. Now, I think we need the administrators for the system to run. But everyone seems to agree that the people at the grassroots, the teachers, the paraprofessionals, are really the vital ones.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And but you know, my concern about the whole thing is primarily, I think they're worth, you know, more than what they're getting, personally, and I think the board has made them I think a reasonable offer, from what I've seen. The thing that really bugs me is the fact that a person works 3.5 hours a day, 17.5 hours a week, 183 days, gets $1,000 a month worth of fringe benefits. That's an awful lot of money. If you take that out, if you take their salaries, which is presently beginning salary for a para is $981, if you take that and you divide it out, you know, you take the 17.5 hours per week, or 3.5 hours, and multiply it times 183, and then divide that number of hours into their fringe benefit package and add it on, they're making about $20 to $25 an hour. I mean, that's a lot of money. Now, on the other hand, the paras that are full-time, you divide theirs out, and it comes out to somewhere around $18, $17, $18 an hour, which is, it's fair. I mean, it's not a huge living, but it's fair. I mean, if they work all year, it would be better, but they don't. And so consequently, I do have a problem. You know, we've got, I think there's 9 paras that are less than 8/10. And if we're paying them, excuse me, approximately $12,000 a year in fringe benefits, that's $108,000 that we're paying those folks at. That's a substantial amount of money.
We're winding down to our last 3.5 minutes here, and wanted to touch on this just a little bit because we had promised it in an earlier portion of the show. The soda being sold in schools. I know on our website we had done a survey on that. You know, what people thought if soda should be sold in the schools to the students, or if there should be more healthy drinks. And you were an advocate, I guess, of not having soda and having more healthy drinks. You went and you looked at the Appleton School District. Pepsi has the exclusive contract in our school system.
That's correct, yeah.
right now, the soda is being sold in the schools. Is this going to be revisited at any point, or what's happening with that?
To be honest with you, I don't know. I would like to see it revisited, and I've talked to a few parents, and I guess what I've said to them is, if you want to be heard about it, start coming to board meetings and doing some public, get into public forum and the non-agenda type things, and start voicing your concerns, and so that there's a push from the community. Right now, I don't think there would be enough support on the board to eliminate it. Appleton has eliminated their soft drink machines. They have to be, I've got some more information, they have to be milk, water, or I think it's 25% right now this year, 25% juice. And next year it has to be 100% juice.
And that's district-wide in Appleton?
That's it's district-wide, yeah. It's
and they're performing better, right? Both staff
Yes.
and students?
Yeah, yeah. They're also providing a breakfast and things like that up there too for them, and that has created some. It's the board adopts nutrition standards. I guess I have that one, and it just kind of goes through and says what they're doing. This year it's milk, water, beverages containing 25% juice may be sold on school grounds both prior to and throughout the instructional day. Next year it's going to be 100%, and so consequently they've taken that out. And there's also other concerns rather than just the learning aspect. It's the obesity.
Sure.
We have gone from, was it 1991, I think we were at about 10 to 14% of us were obese, and now we're at the 20 to 24% of us in Wisconsin are classified as obese. And that's not good, and kids, they drink the soda and get wired up. And
Right. Well, basically, school boards just find the financial part of it too hard to turn down. It's that simple, right?
Well, I don't.
Pepsi's offering.
Pepsi is offering or has paid us
Yeah.
$75,000 up front to be the exclusive provider for a 10-year contract.
Sure.
And I think after that it's $500, and then we get that went to the school or to the district, and all the profits then go to the clubs and organizations that are doing it. So consequently, the ones that would ultimately be the losers financially would be the clubs and organizations, which means that we as the school board members would have to pick up the slack to support them, which I think we should do. I think it's terrible that we're selling soda to our kids and causing them to be unhealthy and everything else, so.
Yeah, I mean, Pepsi has a captive audience, to build brand loyalty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We allow big corporations to market to kids.
And the expectations, I believe, is around 10,000 cases of soda a year.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, well, on that note, I'd like to thank you very much for being here.
Well, thank you.
We didn't beat you up that badly.
No, you didn't. You were pretty nice to me.
You survived.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks very much. Don Sween from the Oshkosh Area School Board. For Tony Palmeri, who I thank wholeheartedly as well, and thank you for joining us tonight and having us into your homes. We'll see you next time. Until then, keep your eye on us. We've got our eye on Oshkosh.